Hi there. I am Elaine. I'm the director of Capilaux Aero, and I'm joined today by David Whiffen, the managing director of OdiliaClark. So, Capilaux Aero, for those of you who don't know, we are a talent solutions business that focuses on connecting people across the aerospace and aviation sector. Joined with me today is David. And David, do you want to start by saying exactly what OdiliaClark do?
Yes, hello. Thank you for having me. We are a impairment management risk management business. So we work to support clients, protecting the organization, the staff, the customers from the impact of having impaired staff performing their roles. By impaired, typically we are referring to under the influence of drugs or alcohol.
Okay, so that's quite a topical subject at the moment. For those of you that don't know, there's a new regulation that's come in across the whole aerospace and aviation sector, across the whole of the EU, I believe. And so when did that come in, David? And tell us a little bit more about that.
Bit of a to set the scene, it's probably important to note that there are already two other industries globally that are regulated with drugs and alcohol management programs, and that is the marine and the oil and gas industries. And then most countries have a specific railway focused drugs and alcohol policy management program that dictates the typically lower levels of substance or alcohol within an employee. So EASA, the European Aviation Safety Agency, have dictated that as of the 14th of August, what was supposed to be 2020, all aircraft operators would have to adhere to a new set of regulations. That got pushed back, or it got pushed back at the middle point of last year because of the pandemic to the 14th of February. So it came into force on the 14th of February.
Okay, so these are now a new set of regulations that airlines and operators have to adhere to. And what specifically are they? What are the changes?
So there's three key elements really to the regulation change. There is a peer support element. So companies have to provide a level of peer support program that is essentially a confidential network of peers that a pilot or a safety critical person can talk to if they have some concerns or some worries. There is increased psychometric testing on the potential pilots. And the third part, which is the part that we address, is for psychoactive substance management. And within psychoactive substances, they include alcohol and prescription drugs.
Okay, that's interesting. So it's actually not just illegal drugs; it's a wide range of things that they'll be tested for. Is it something that they have to do, or just if they suspect it? What's the new regulation?
Again, within the regulation, then it's broken down into really 7 core elements, I would say. And those core elements are at the top level, they are all covered by policy. So if you don't have, if you don't have the policy in place, what you don't have is you don't have a set of rules for the organization to behave by, for the employees to behave with, and to communicate to the authority how the organization is going to behave. And then quite rightly, EASA underneath that have then put requirements on training of the workforce. So training of the workforce on both the policy and on how drugs and alcohol can impact and affect performance. So this is, if you think this is all about performance, then there is a requirement for the testing of new pilots or the testing of safety critical staff. And EASA have left safety critical staff quite vague. So there is the testing of safety critical staff prior to employment. Then there is a random testing requirement. And within random testing requirements, we see quite large variation within a client base on what they might consider the random requirement amount to be tested.
What
So
would
that
you
would be,
so, obviously this is your expertise. What would you advise in terms of random drug testing? Like, so would you say it's going to be 10% of the workforce, 20% of the workforce on an annual basis? What would you say, as an expert in the industry on this, would be an appropriate amount?
I would say do the right amount of testing is what your budget allows you to do within safety for quality testing. So rather than picking a figure out of the air, and we have clients that test anywhere from 8% of the workforce up to 100% of the workforce. But actually the most important bit is, what does your budget allow, and use the right type of testing to look into what is acting on your staff and provide a proper basis for risk management decision making.
It's like with the very topical at the moment, the coronavirus testing, you don't want a bad test. You want to make sure that it's, done correctly. Is that right?
Absolutely. And a bad test can have a significant impact on your business. I'm not saying that bad tests will, but they can produce false positives or false negatives. And arguably a false negative is significantly worse than a false positive. In the worst case, a false positive, you're going to have to stand that employee down. You're going to have to go back to the laboratory. You're going to have to find the substance or not find the substance, disprove the theory, and then reinstate that employee back into work. So you've caused the disruption, the commercial disruption of standing the pilot down. You then have to raise a secondary crew. Then you've then got anxiety within the workforce member. And you've then got the disruption or the reputational disruption that you potentially have for that employee. Flip that over to a false negative, and potentially you've got employees performing their duties, flying an aircraft under the influence of something, and you think that they are actually clear of that substance. So there is, I would say, and there is huge variation within the equipment that is used.
Okay. So I've got a question coming in from a HR director, and that is, they currently use urine testing, and they do it on a four-cause basis, but they're looking into when the new regulation comes in England and Wales. Can you just comment on that? Is that the right way to go? So they do four-cause with urine testing, and they just want to see if that's going to meet the regulation within their business.
To use urine-based testing systems is not something that we do as a company. Urine testing isn't really a true show of impairment. So a urine-based testing system won't show what is acting on an employee at the point of consumption. You're probably looking for really a 1 to 2 day post-consumption window with urine for anywhere up to 3 to 4 weeks in terms of showing what is acting on the person. If you really want a true show of impairment, and if you think that a four-cause, so the reason you would do a four-cause test, there are 3 main reasons: on suspicion, post-incident, or post-accident. But in all 3 of those instances, really, you would want to see what is acting on that person at the point that you are conducting the test. So my advice really would be that urine-based testing systems for that sort of testing isn't applicable.
Yeah, it doesn't really sound fit for purpose, especially if there has been an incident within the business. It's not necessarily about what they were doing 3 weeks ago. It's kind of if they were under the influence at that point in time. There's a lot of, I suppose, there's people's career in the balance here as well, and so actually getting the right sort of testing is probably quite critical.
Well, I would probably jump in there and say that for us as a testing organisation, and I would also say for union bodies and for employee bodies, More significantly, urine-based testing systems look at essentially they're a lifestyle-based testing system. So they will see what an employee did on a Friday night or a Saturday night, or 2 weeks ago, where if they went on holiday somewhere, and maybe somewhere where let's say where cannabis is a legalized substance, so Amsterdam, Canada, California, parts of Australia, then actually you would find that with a urine-based testing system. With impairment-based testing systems, then actually we are not encroaching into an employee's lifestyle. We're not looking at what that employee does in their time. For me, this is all about, are you fit to do the job at the point you're being paid to do the job, and nothing more.
Okay. And actually, from a lot of businesses' perspectives, people sort of joke, but they say, if I did introduce drugs and alcohol testing into my business, I wouldn't have a business left, is sometimes a lot of what some business owners would say. And so actually impairment-based testing that's now going to be brought in as a regulatory thing that has to be done, but routine, really having an impairment-based testing system, there's probably a lot more benefits to that than looking sort of into someone's lifestyle, I guess.
Absolutely. And I think we hear the argument, I wouldn't have a business left, probably quite a lot. And I think that's partly because people still think the old way around drug and alcohol testing. And when I joined the army 20 years ago, urine-based testing systems were quite normal and are still quite normal today. And there's lots of organizations that specifically focus on urine-based testing systems. But ultimately as well, for the company, one option is that it can reduce an insurance premium. So insurance companies are open to bursaries. So you can often have your programs funded by a bursary to help manage risk, which is why I talk about impairment risk and I don't talk about drugs and alcohol testing. We are an impairment risk management business. We're not a lifestyle employee drug and alcohol testing business.
But there's going to be a lot of people that are watching this thinking, I went to LA with a couple of my friends and, we smoked some marijuana there, and that is perfectly legal. There's nothing, if it's legal there, then a lot of people would say, well, I haven't broken the law. I'm not impaired because that was 3 weeks ago and I've come to work. But there's going to be a lot of people that work in the aviation sector. They could be, engineers that work on planes, and they could be pretty scared if their employers start to say, well, we're going to be doing this routine drugs and alcohol testing, and their name gets called up. There's probably a fear of them losing their jobs because of that, and therefore, instead of facing up to just doing the drugs and alcohol test and hoping for the best, some of them might quit that particular position and go and find a job elsewhere. You've got a lot of fear, I think, across many employees because it's not communicated exactly what they're looking for, whether they're looking for impairment or that they have, whether or not they've taken drugs ever in their life. What would you say?
Well, I think you hit on a couple of points there. So firstly, whether you are in a state, a geography where cannabis is legalized or not, it has no bearing. Alcohol is legalized. We don't change the rules for alcohol consumption in the workplace or for drink driving because alcohol is a legalized product. We are not, as a company, we are not focused, and nor do we care on the legality. We are not there to pass a judgment or a sentence on the donor, on the employee that we are testing. We are there to look at, is the employee fit to carry out the task at the point at which they're being paid to carry out the task. So then the next point of your question is somebody who has been to Amsterdam or to wherever it may be where they are allowed to consume a substance on holiday. If you use the wrong testing system, or if you use a non-impairment testing system, then potentially you would look for a legacy metabolite within somebody's urine, and you would find what they did 2 or 3 weeks ago on holiday. And this is particularly more pertinent with cannabis, because cannabis stays in the system significantly longer. If you're using an oral fluid-based testing system, part of what makes the cannabis stay in the system longer also makes it harder for us to find it with oral fluid. So that means then the likelihood of us getting a positive show, what we would term as a non-negative show, when we are performing a workplace point of care screening test, is significantly reduced, because we are only looking for active compounds. So if it's not active, we're not going to find it ultimately.
Okay, I think that would probably, I think really actually a lot of it is going to be about educating your staff and delivering it in the correct manner when you are making these changes and those having those roll out, which is obviously something that you do well. I believe, you know, you build those bespoke packages for each individual business to make sure, you know, the employee communications are right. And then that this, you know, change in regulation doesn't actually have a huge impact on these businesses that are probably already struggling because of the coronavirus pandemic. Today, I would say, you know, I could speak to you for hours and hours, and this is really fascinating. All of the drugs and alcohol management, there's so many issues and so many things that people want to know about around this subject, because it's quite a taboo subject. And I think discussing it, there's a real interest there, especially when it comes to aerospace and aviation, because it is that, you know, that safety critical industry. So I think we'll definitely have some more conversation around, you know, what you do. We could go into so many different areas, like the EU regulation, why that was, you know, the impairment versus lifestyle testing, and, you know, specifically how an organisation goes about it. So there's so many more things that we can talk about, but we unfortunately don't have time to go into it today. But I would love to have you on again, just to dive a little bit deeper and to have a chat around, you know, how businesses have, let's say, a couple of months in, coped with this new regulation that has just come into force. So if you're happy to come on again and talk to us, then we'd be really, really happy to have you.
Let's do it. Yeah, definitely. Thank you for having me.
No, lovely. Thank you for coming on and having a chat about this new regulation and what it means and what you do. It is really fascinating. So thank you very much, David.
Cheers, Elaine. Thank you. See you later. Bye.